In 1963, our family moved to Dore Lake, and in 1963, I was 16. Now, the town site, if you could call it a town, was called South End, here at the south end of Dore Lake. Could that be why they named it South End? Even though we lived at South End, I spent most of my summers on Michelle Point, both at Camp Carmel and Michelle Lodge. In fact, my very first job was at Michelle Lodge in 1965. I worked there all summer. Now, thanks to Google Earth, I am able to give you a bit of perspective as to where is Dore Lake in relationship to where you live. Now, because of the internet, we are all living in a very small world, so let's try and get along and take care of it. Now, my dad was a real adventurer. He loved dogs and camping. He liked boats and motors. He had his commercial pilot's license, and among other things, he was a bush pilot. And I guess a lot of that kind of rubbed off on me. I had the privilege of sort of tagging along with him on a lot of his adventures. So I guess Dore Lake really got into my blood. By the way, that's me on the right. I was 15. That would have been the spring of 1961. We were camping very close to Dore Lake. Now, because my brother and I had lived at Dore Lake many years ago, we wanted to go back there on sort of a nostalgia tour. And I'd been back about, a little over 25 years ago, but my brother hadn't been back for about 43 years, so this was a real treat for him. And we stayed at Michelle Lodge, where I had worked in 1965, 51 years ago. Now, I'd like to talk about the changes that I noticed, and the major change is probably the trees around the house where we used to live. By the way, it's the one on the left. My dad built that. I helped a little bit. And when we lived there, there was only the odd little sapling around the house. Now there's big trees. And the second change is, now there's a cemetery at South End. Now, when we lived here back in the early 60s, I never thought about these people dying someday. We were all going to live forever. I can put a face to pretty well all these names. I well remember Harry Husak. Well, everybody that knew Harry would remember him. He would do anything to help you if he could. And Ferdy Edquist, I can well remember him. He was the same age as me, and he helped to build that house that you saw earlier. I can well remember him working on the floor joists and helping to put down the flooring. I think that perhaps this is the saddest one. Darwin, when we first moved here, was a little boy about 8 years old. He used to come over and play with my brother. And this is him. One of the Dore Lake residents spearheaded building this church, and I'm told that they cut all the logs there locally, and it gives it a wonderful rustic look. That building is not anywhere near as old as it looks. Isn't this fantastic? Stepping inside is almost like going back in time. Now, we heated our house with a barrel heater exactly like that our first winter here at Dore Lake. You know, I felt like it was a real honor to be able to put my name in that guest book. Now, I know this doesn't have a whole lot to do with Dore Lake, but the town that we lived in just before we moved to Dore, I just measured it on Google Earth. It's 54 miles as the crow flies. Now, of course, we couldn't take a crow, so we had to go by road, which was about 100. Anyway, that's where my brother was born, and this was the house that we lived in. Now, I think probably one of the most disturbing changes up at Dore Lake is me. That's me, 52 years ago, standing beside my very first cabin. It was just a shed that I converted into a cabin. I put a window in it and painted it up, made it look nice. Well, here I am, last week, standing beside the same cabin. I wonder which one of us has fared the best.